Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
Post to close. And then finally, if you want, you can quickly see what's missing in a file just by hovering over the complete column. Because each of your transactions will have a checklist or more that you'll use to keep track of required paperwork or tasks that need to be done. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions about the transaction stage and what's there? While here, you can also retrieve transactions. So let's say I just want to search for transaction by property address or MLS or agent or seller buyer. I could go ahead and run a quick search and pull up a specific transaction that way. Again, Pipeline keeps transactions for 10 years for all active accounts, and so you can easily pull up transactions that way. Let's go ahead and dive into a transaction for a second. And we'll take a look at this one in which we're on the selling side or on the listing side. Take a look. So this, friends, is a transaction. If you think about it, if you're coming from the kind of paper world, it's kind of just like a file folder. It's an online file folder where you can store a copy of your checklist. You can add documents. And you can put documents in what we call like different folders. Finally, you can add transaction, info to the transaction. So this is where it kind of gets interesting. So you can have your agents be the ones to set up the transaction or staff. And so, to get all this information in here, you might not want to track all of that, but if we wanted to change the status of this transaction or update any of these transaction details, real simple, we just click Edit Transaction here. And we can go in and we can change close date. Let's just say we got a contract, extension of closing to the 25th, which is this Thursday. And you can add your agents to transactions. So let's say Joe is actually on the selling side. So technically you can give multiple agents within your office access to that transaction. You can also track who the cooperating agent is. You can track their information. So if you want to have their information handy for later on retrieval, if you're accessing transactions from a mobile device, you can do that. So that's how you get the kind of basic transaction info in there. So basically, anytime you want to update the status of a transaction or anything like that, you can just click Edit Transaction. If you want to upload documents to a transaction, you can get documents in different ways. We'll talk through scanning documents to the system in a few minutes. But basically, you or your agents can upload documents to the transaction just by clicking Upload here, and go ahead and upload a few documents. You can also email your documents in to the transaction. The transaction has its own email address. And then finally, what we'll talk through here is you can add contacts to your transactions. So contacts these are people who you might want to communicate with and send an email or a note to. So you can easily add contacts to a transaction like this. So we can go ahead and say, I don't know, utility guy, whatever. So Pipeline will remember your contacts as well. So if you think about it, it's really just like a digital file folder, just like a paper file folder, in which you can track all your processes that you may be doing right now offline or in another system. Let's talk about checklists first. Actually, before we do talk about checklists, any questions so far? Just a quick yes or no in the chat. If you let me know there. And I'm going to go ahead and load another checklist in the transaction while you respond. So no's all around. Does that mean pretty straightforward so far? Cool. Buddy asked the question, does each agent have their own login? Yep. Each agent you add agents to the system and you give them a login. And that way the agent, for example, we've assigned to the listing side, Monta, Cami, and well, Tim Smith shouldn't be on this, and Joe. So any agent from your brokerage would have access to the transactions to which they've been assigned. And if you want, the agents can set up their own transactions, or if you prefer staff to do it, staff can set up the transactions, and agents can just email their documents into an inbox, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Does that answer your question, buddy? So Jeff is asking, how do we manage checklists? Perfect. That's where I was going next. So once documents get uploaded to a transaction, and we'll actually move it to the sale category. So we're like moving it to a different folder or a different section within the transaction. So let's say the agent submits a purchase contract, which you can see here. What's cool about it is it'll highlight the task in the checklist that that document corresponds to. And one of the things you can do in Pipeline is you can preview documents just by clicking on the name of the document. So you can easily take a look at a document. As you can see, this is just a sample. And that way you know which task within the checklist that document corresponds to. So if once you reviewed the document, and if this had multiple pages, we could page through it to review it. We can zoom out on it. Once you've reviewed it, if it is complete, you can go ahead and mark it off. Generally, we recommend, just like you would, not giving agents the ability to upload documents, but not mark things off as completed in the checklist. That way you have kind of like a system of checks and balances where agents responsible for submitting the correct document to the transaction, and then you or your staff would go ahead and review it, mark it as reviewed once you've done that, and if it is complete, you'd go ahead and mark it off as complete in the checklist. Hopefully that answers your question, Jeff. And with the checklist, what's nice about it is you can create checklists that are specific to your office. So, and you can create as many different checklists as you want. So let's take a look, for example, here. You may create, if you do commercial transactions, you may create like a commercial sale checklist. Or, if you do transaction coordination, if you're a transaction coordinator, you may create a transaction coordinator checklist. I don't even know what's in there. That's an example of a checklist, for example. So you can create as many checklists you want that might relate to different types of transactions or different stages of a transaction. So for example, I might add something called our closing checklist residential. And it may have a bunch of, things in that checklist. And you can actually edit and modify the checklist to fit like a glove. So let's say you didn't need a lead-based paint on this. You could remove it. As you can see, there's some due dates in here. The way the due dates work is the due dates are based upon relative events. So in other words, we said this is due on acceptance date. And we built that into our template. And you can remove due dates or you can change them. You can even change them to a calendar date. As you can see, this is due 3 calendar days before close. So basically, you can set up date rules on your checklist so that the due dates auto-populate and then send the agent a reminder that such and such is due, or the admin. So you can have it go to the admin, the listing agent, the selling agent, or so forth. You can also add tasks to checklists. So basically, you can modify. So let's say you needed a proof of funds, for example. So you can move checklist tasks around. You can even notify the agents what's missing. So let's say, for example, I wanted to let our agent know, our selling agent, I'll select his name there, that he needs to submit, I don't know, for example, we could say still missing paperwork. So we could apply a message template so it populates the subject and the message body. And then we could go in here and say, you need the following. And we could just drop those things in, and then we could go ahead and send a message to that agent. Last part of the transaction I want to show you is the communication log. So in order to be in good compliance, you need to track communication and you need to do it well. And whatever transaction management system you decide on, you should make sure it does that. That way you have a digital log that's time and date stamped according to all communication that's happening. So for example, we just sent that and it logged to that event. We can see who it was sent to, who sent it, and what was said. And it goes back all the way, we can see when the status changed from listing to pending, who did that. So it's tracking all events that are taking place within the transaction. So a good transaction management system should provide, a kind of a full history or story that you could provide to an auditor. And so you can and that brings me to kind of the next thing, which is if you ever need to download everything in this transaction, for example, a copy of all your documents, a copy of your checklist, a copy of all your transaction info, you could easily with 2 clicks do that. Click download transaction, and it'll send you a copy of that transaction. One of the files that it includes in there is a file we call the transaction history, which is a even more detailed time and date log of exactly everything that was done. It's a compliance tool. So again, the idea here is to streamline kind of all activities related to a transaction in one single place and provide a detailed log of those events. Because in any given transaction, I don't know about your office, but most of our customers, there's multiple people touching a transaction. So agent might be responsible for uploading the document. And we can see that Cami did this on January 8th at 3:51 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we can see that Cami broke these documents apart, which I'll talk through in a few minutes, how you can split documents in the system. And then we can see that, like Rachel, our broker, reviewed the inspection on January 14th at 2:40 p.m. So Pipeline does a really good job of keeping you compliant and providing you a log of all activities. Let me check in with you so far. This is kind of where I see feedback because it looks like a few more questions. Cool, buddy. You get the star asking great questions. So I'm just going to post some questions that I'm getting here in the chat, and feel free to put your questions in there if you have questions. Unfortunately, I can't mind read, so feel free to ask. Who's in charge of the checklist? Can one person be in charge of the checklist to make sure everything is done? So let's say the agent can't go in and change it, showing it was done when it was not done. Exactly. So one of the things you do when you add agents to the system is there's a set of permissions you can assign to an agent. These permissions are really fluid and flexible and can be determined per agent. So for example, there's what we call the Manage Users page. And this is where you basically upload your roster, upload all the people who are part of the system, and create a login for them. So for example, for Joe, we can see he works out of our downtown office. So we don't recommend giving an agent the ability to manage checklists. You may give them the ability to add checklists to their transactions, but when it comes to marking things off as complete, we generally recommend that that's reserved for staff only, and you can have it only go to a specific staff level user who's in charge of the checklist. So there's all kinds of permissions that you can use to kind of build your workflow in terms of what an agent is able to do and not able to do. Cool. So does it keep the emails sent and received? Yeah. So one of the other questions that just came through, and I think that was from you also, buddy, is where does it keep the email sent and received? Yeah. So if you're sending emails out of the system, as you can see, we email Joe Agent. It records a copy of that email that's outbound. Well, if the agent clicks reply to that email, reply all, it will send a copy of their response back into the system, and will also notify you if you were the one who sent the original email to that agent. Any emails that are sent back to the transaction will get stored in this received email section. And if you want to just forward an email, maybe some correspondence that you received from the outside agent, from the other agent, you could just actually copy this email address and forward a copy of your course, your emails to this email address, and it'll store those emails on what we call the received email page. Cool. Michael's asking, how does broker review work? It's a great question. So that's a really good question. So let's say our agent uploads a few documents to this transaction. How do you as the broker know that the agent submitted new documents? We're just going to click here to upload. We'll just grab a few documents. So let's say we're going to submit, I don't know what I got. Let's just submit this addendum for backup contract. And we could take a couple if we want to. We could take up to 15 documents, plug them in there, and rename them. We'll just say this is a sale document. So anytime an agent uploads new documents to a transaction, you can opt, if you and your staff can opt to receive an email notification, so you know new documents are waiting to be reviewed. It'll highlight those documents here when you head to the transaction, or as you can see that they were just uploaded. The other thing that happens is if you have what's called the unreviewed page, and we generally recommend that's a permission-based setting, giving that permission to whoever's charged with kind of the final doc review. So let's go ahead and head over to the unreviewed page so you can see how this works. It's super simple. It's kind of like a front desk for a broker. So while if you're using paper, and file folders across your desk, same idea here. So we can see that these documents were submitted just now. We can see who the agents are on this transaction. We can see the status of the transaction. We can see when it's closing. We can even review the documents from here if we want. Now, keep in mind, this is just like an inbox where all documents that have been submitted to a transaction can be reviewed. So what you can do is you can go ahead and just mark them as reviewed here. Boom, once you've reviewed it. But if you wanted to review from within the transaction itself, you can go ahead and open that file folder, which will open in a new window. That way you don't lose your place, and you can go back here and figure out what documents for other transactions need to be reviewed. So you can come down here in the right column, and you can easily see what docs still need to be reviewed. We can see that this document hasn't been reviewed. And so we could add a comment to it when we're reviewing it. So let's say we determine it's missing a signature on page 1. There's only one page here. You can quickly add a comment to the document. They need signature on page 1. And that'll send an email to whoever the agent was who submitted the document. And it'll add that comment to the file. Then you can mark it as reviewed there, and it'll remove it from your unreviewed page. So the unreviewed page is just kind of a single place you can go to review all documents. We're 24 or 23 minutes in, and I always lose track of time. So help me help you. I've showed you the transactions page. I've showed you the unreviewed page. I haven't showed you the tasks page, which is a single place you can go to see all due dates across all transactions and sync those due dates with your calendar if you want. You can search for tasks as well by task or transaction name. And then finally, here's the dashboard. So I'm just going to go to the questions box at this point because I want to make sure that there's enough time to get all your questions answered. So if you haven't asked, if you do have a question, ask away. And we'll definitely get your question answered. So Michael's asking, how do we set up our checklist? Does Pipeline come with checklists built in? It comes with a couple of sample checklists. So one thing you can do is if you click on admin over here, basically you have an admin page where you set the account up for your office. And one of those pages is called the checklist templates area. So this is where you'd set up your checklist. And a checklist is really simple. It just consists of you name your checklist, you put a bunch of tasks into the checklist or document names. Move these around if you need to. And then if you want, you can set up automation rules for when the checklist should automatically be triggered or added to a transaction based upon the status of the transaction, the label you used, and or transaction side. or you can just manually add checklists to transactions. So, and you can create as many checklists as you want, Michael. So quiet group today. Cool. So buddies, this is a question I get a lot. It's like he's asking about eSign and how Pipeline works. So we have a built-in integration with DocuSign. You don't need to use DocuSign to take advantage of the system, but if you want, our integration with DocuSign allows you to import and export documents between both systems. You have to have a DocuSign account. Otherwise, if your agents use a different digital signature tool, so be it. And that's one of the things I want to emphasize is the more change you kind of, I would say not force, but the more change you try to get in most agents to make. So before we launched Pipeline, I worked with a 180 agent brokerage, and trying to switch to, trying to get our office to go paperless was difficult because we had independent contractor agents. And so Pipeline is just, if you think about it this way, it's not going to replace the forms or form simplicity. Wherever agents are already going to fill out their forms, we recommend you having agents continue to do so with that tool because it's one less thing to learn. All agents really have to do to learn how to use Pipeline is how to submit their documents to the system, which is pretty easy. You can teach your agents to email their documents in. If they want to log in, you can teach them to log in and upload their documents that way. Or if an agent's still using paper, you can use kind of what we call the inbox, which is where, a single inbox where agents can just scan their documents to. So this page has an email address, which you can put in the scanner so agents can scan their documents directly here. There's a lot of different ways to use Pipeline, but at the end of the day, getting agents to use it is not difficult. There's not a lot. It's not like they have to relearn a bunch of new processes. How are we doing, everybody out there? So far, so good. Is this helpful? So Blake is asking about security. If you guys want to learn more about kind of security and how that works, and Crystal, I see your question about, Kristen, I'm sorry. I see your question about pricing, and I'll get to that in a second. So if you want, you can just go ahead and head over to our site, and you can go to the security section. Basically, Pipeline use is, I'm not going to get into the technical details, but it tells you kind of what our infrastructure is, how we do backups of all our customers' data, how that's backed up, what the encryption process we use, and so forth. Let's just say there's offices with upwards of about 1,000 agents who are very, into security, and who are using Pipeline. So whether you're, 5 agents or 1,000 agents, Pipeline is really kind of designed to scale with you, but remain secure and keep your files in a secure format. Kristen is asking how the pricing works. Sweet. Glad you're finding this helpful, Raleigh and Jennifer. So here's another thing, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but this is a good best practice. When you're going paperless, don't sign up for a system with a long-term contract until you're 100% positive your agents absolutely love the system and are going to use it. I talked with a broker last week in Texas, signed up for a system based upon a demonstration like this, signed up for a long-term contract, paid setup fees and all that. Agents aren't using the system and he's back using paper, but he's paying for a paperless system that he's not even using. So how does that relate to Pipeline? Well, one of the things with Pipeline is if you want to try it out, go ahead and try it out if you don't already have a trial account. It's 5 free transactions. Thereafter, if you want to continue using the system, there's no long-term contracts. It's all month to month. You can change plans at any time. You can cancel at any time. And I'll show you in a few minutes another best practices, how you can easily extract a copy of your data each month and back it up offline. That way you have an online copy of your transactions, and if you want the peace of mind, you can also have an offline copy of your transactions. So to answer your question, Tristan, the transactions pipeline's pricing, whether you have 1,000 agents or 5, like I said, the system doesn't differentiate between the number of people using the system in your office. It's just based upon the number of new transactions that you're creating per month. So if you sign up for 25 transactions today, you basically have 25 new transactions you can create over the next 30 days. If you needed more, you can always bump up to another plan. So the nice thing about transaction-based pricing is if you're in a real estate market, like I think it was Jim in Milwaukee, you may have large seasonal swings, be doing a lot more volume during summer than winter. And so you can change your plan at any time to accommodate your. A transaction is like a file holder, so it can be a listing or a sale. If it's both, it's still only one transaction. There's no setup fees whatsoever. So really all you do is, if you try it out and you like it, all you do is upgrade to a, you're just basically saying, I want additional transactions for the next 30 days, and you're purchasing a plan. From there on, it's just all month to month. And yeah, hopefully it's pretty simple. We've designed the pricing to be as simple as possible, where you don't have to rack your brain. And you don't have to pay, fees for idle agents. If an agent only does one deal a year, it's not like you're paying for them month over month. So the training Buddy's asking about is we'll do a live training for you and your staff if you want. We've got a very simple site for agent training. It's got like a couple of, small, really quick tutorial videos that show agents, how to upload docs, how to set up a transaction, and how to log in, things of that nature. Really simple. And then for your admins, we've got an admin training site with short tutorial videos, and we can set up a live training for you and your admin team. Katrina, I see your question. Thanks for your question. What reporting features are available? And we're going to be winding that down here in just about 5 minutes. So if you haven't posted your question, ask now. Katrina's asking what reporting features are available. So and I'm going to answer that question twofold. We've got 2 sets of reports on the reports page. We have transaction reports, which helps you kind of stay on top of your transactions. So we could pull up, let's say, like we did earlier, all transactions that have been added in February, for example, and there's a list of them that way. The other set of reports we have is what we call our financial reports. Those are production-related reports. And these reports are fed by an optional kind of financial commissions. So while some offices may use, I'm curious how you do that right now, Katrina. How do you do, generate commission reports for tracking production? Let me know. And the rest of you also. So there's different reports related to, like, for example, if you wanted to pull up a production report for your agent Joe, and you wanted to say, what has he produced so far this year? It'll tell you what his entire commissions, sides closed, all the transactions he closed, sales volume, etc. You can generate that at an office level as well. There's something called a commission summary. I'm not going to get too much into detail, but Pipeline can allow you to do all your back office functions as well with our financial plugin. Cool, gang. Hopefully I answered all your questions. So I'm going to hang around for just a couple more minutes. I don't see any other questions coming through. I guess what I challenge you to do, and this is maybe the takeaway, if you don't remember anything that I told you today, I'll point you to 2 things. Number 1, try whatever systems you're looking at, try them out with your agents. Your agents may give you a very different opinion than you have of that system. So that's always a good kind of litmus test. That way you don't have to deal with salespeople or anything like that, or the finesse of somebody like me presenting. Try them out. See if it has the features you want. The other thing I was going to offer is a great question to ask as you go through this process is, if I stop using the system, is it easy to get a copy of my data out? Some systems you literally have to download document by document. Pipeline has a feature called the monthly backups, which is basically you can back up your data each month. You can download an offline copy of your transactions, so you can kind of have the best of, so you can get notified when the system's generated a backup for you. Head over to the monthly backup page and download a copy of your backup for that. Julio, sweet. All right, cool. So one thing I want to leave you with today is this is actually may save you a lot of time and energy and headache. So there's a few questions that I didn't cover that I just don't have time for, but they're covered in what we call our kind of weighing the benefits of a paperless office. So I'll email this to you. Be on the lookout for it. Definitely a useful thing that could save you literally a lot of money and hours of headache. So look in your inbox for that, and feel free to hit reply to that email if there's something that I didn't cover or something that I could help with that comes up after we wrap here. Cool. So other than that, if you got what you came for, you can close out the webinar. I'm going to hang around, like I said, for a few more minutes and just mute myself to see if there's any straggler questions, okay? Thank you all for joining me today. Hope you found the time useful.